Aaaction. Welcome to a new series, people. One of the things when, as a filmmaker, especially in the streaming world, it's like you have all these movies, and I will always try and challenge myself. I don't, not to just watch, Braveheart for the 8,000th time or Armageddon. I wanted to always continue to watch things that I've never seen before. Obviously, I attended film school, and you watch a good amount of movies there, but even then, there's still so many that you miss, and specifically there's time periods that you miss. And so the whole purpose of this series is to watch something as kind of a group, almost like a book club, but kind of have like an old time movie club. And so that's kind of the inspiration of this series. I brought my friend Drew here. Drew, you can also catch him on our regular podcast. He has been on. Drew, help me out. What other podcasts have you helped me out?
Did Jaws,
Jaws,
Star
yeah.
Wars, Pulp Fiction, and Shawshank.
Yeah. And Shawshank was our last one. So, and he'll be on some upcoming ones once we get that back going. We're getting everything back going, guys. So, we appreciate you joining us, though. And so this week, I picked a film from Netflix. So again, the other part of this goal is I want people to be able to watch this. I don't want to pick a movie that you have to buy or purchase. I want it to be pretty much in people's hands. So we're going to pick major films from streaming services that are out currently so that you can join along with us. And so this week's film is called The Great Waldo Pepper. This came out in 1975. And this was directed by George Roy Hill. And for some of you who are a little bit of film buffs, that name might sound familiar. He directed Butch, Cassidy in the Sundance Kid, as well as The Sting. And those are two highly acclaimed films. So George Roy Hill is no slouch when it comes to the director's chair. He had a very illustrious career. And he co-wrote this film with William Goldman, who also might ring your ear a little bit because he wrote, Drew, do you know this?
I don't think so.
He wrote The Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he actually wrote the novel, and then they hired him to then turn it into a screenplay.
You said Golding, right?
Goldman.
Goldman, okay.
Yeah, and then he also directed All the President's Men. And so, again, another illustrious writer. Those two actually had a falling out, apparently, during the filming of this, which I found pretty interesting. But this, of course, stars Robert Redford, who, you're pretty much finding him at the peak of his career during this time. So this is a big movie in the 70s. It also stars a young Susan Sarandon. She has a small role in this, as well as Margot Kidder and Geoffrey Lewis, who is Juliette Lewis's father, if you do not know. And the premise of this film is after World War I, an ex-pilot takes up barnstorming. I tried to look this up, guys. Barnstorming is not storming a barn. It is when you basically, people in the early days of aviation, they would do a bunch of tricks and things with planes, and pretty much became illegal, and that was called barnstorming. So, and then a chance to meet up with a former German ace fighter pilot from World War I, and then they co-star in some Hollywood war movies that depicts aerial dogfights. So this is basically, it's about a pilot that never really gets combat experience, but he always craves it. And so he kind of gets his fix of flying through stunts and daredevils and whatnot because he missed out on this combat. And so that's kind of the premise of the movie. I don't know if that seems fair to you, Drew.
I think that's a very reasonable synopsis.
Yeah. And so this had a rating of 6.7, which is a pretty solid rating. This had a budget of $5 million and made over 20 million worldwide, which is pretty solid. So Drew, I'm going to start with you. We just have a couple little things for our audience members to follow along with. But what was your favorite thing about this film? Let's start with positive.
The cinematography of the aerial scenes. I feel like, and I admittedly, this is a genre of film, like if that's such a thing, like an aviation genre, is not one that I have watched a ton of. Like The Aviator recently with Leo, that was great, whatever. But anyway, this type of film. So I don't know whether this was remarkable technology or cinematography really for the time, for the mid 70s, but to me it felt very real. the flight scenes, especially at the tail end of the movie, kind of that last scene.
Yeah.
If and so for me, that really was kind of the takeaway. I was very impressed with the stunts, the cinematography, that aspect of it. It felt super real. It like nowadays, it's there's no CG. Like it just felt like you were in the cockpit with these guys and you're along for the ride. And that piece of it really impressed me.
Yeah, for sure. I pretty much picked the same thing. I put the flight sequences and the footage, and yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it. A lot of this was actually practical. So, um, it some of the trivia said a lot of this was not shot in studios. So this is, a lot of films back in the day, especially with actors, right? They don't actually know how to fly.
Yeah.
They'll do the green screen or blue screen back then, and all those like fake shots that you're just used to seeing. But this one, I mean, they're all the stunts are pretty much real. There's maybe only a couple shots I felt were maybe a blue screen ones,
Yeah.
but for the most part, they either shot it outside or they shot it, shot it pretty much as real. I know Robert Redford really knows how to fly, and this was a passion project for George Roy Hill because he was a pilot. And so I guess that was a big inspiration for this film. But yeah, I'm 100% with that, with Drew on that one. And this goes to our second question, Drew, which is, does this movie hold up to you?
When it started, I would say no.
Yeah.
Like honestly, the first 20 minutes or so, I was like, this feels so campy, so time period cheesy.
Yeah.
Like it took me a little while to get into it. Like the
You know what it
cinema.
reminded me of when it first started
Yeah.
was The Rocketeer.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of that same beginning, like, early aviation, the crowd, the whole nine. But yeah, I agree with you. It was a little slow start, but
So yeah, but after the slow start, does it hold up? Yeah, I mean, for the reasons I mentioned, I feel like it must have been pretty cutting edge and daring
yeah.
filmmaking at the time. I mean, Robert Redford, it's hard to go wrong with him. He's just one of those people that could carry, and we'll probably talk about this in our favorite films of his, that can carry almost nothing on his back. Not that this
Yeah.
was nothing, but so even though it started slow, his charisma, the filmmaking, you get into the story. I do. I think it holds up, and I was really nervous that it wasn't going to at the start.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't really know what to expect when I picked this movie. I mean, I mainly picked it because of Robert Redford and George Roy Hill. I obviously knew both of them. And, again, like I mentioned earlier, like I hadn't seen a ton of movies from this time period. And so I kind of try to pick a safe bet, if you will. I bet on these two guys because I know them and know some of their work. And yeah, I agree with you. There's definitely some 70s filmmaking in this, and stylistically, but overall, I think because they went with the practical stuff, it works because you're just in it sometimes. And there's a couple scenes I'm just like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen. And we won't do any spoilers on this one because we want you to go see this movie yourselves, and definitely comment below, people. We definitely want to hear other people's opinions on this as well. So make sure you comment below, and of course subscribe and join our club here. But yeah, there's just a couple scenes where it's just like, whoa, I did not see that coming. And I thought even the ending was kind of weird. I think overall the story is a little lacking overall. It's not the most coherent story in the world, but to your point, I think because of the action sequences and the general premise, because this is basically based off of a true story of a real life aviator that, they would do the barnstorming stuff, and that basically started to cause laws to be put in effect, and the FAA and all that stuff, because people were, dying and causing ruckuses all over the place, across the country. So yeah, I think overall it holds up pretty decently. I will say this is not a general audience for everybody type of a film. I do think you have to have a little bit of appreciation for older films. But I think if you like aviation stuff, I think even if you're just a modern filmmaker, I think this works in that regard. Again, but I don't think it's for everybody.
I agree, and I also agree that there was some plot, maybe not plot holes, but like just disjointed moments. The ending was surprising. As were
Yeah.
there other moments, like you said, like without spoilers. But I will also say that it it is about aviation, but it's also about like the inner turmoil. Like all he's like his character is almost like the that horrible character from Into the Wild. Or like I don't know, it's just interesting. Like it's just watching a person try to cope with the things that they wanted to get out of life, and did he get it, and
Yeah.
finding other ways to do it. So yeah, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, and I'll just lead right into the next question, which should this no contemporary comparison, and to me this was almost like a poor man's Top Gun, um, Top Gun more Maverick than this one, because again it kind of deals with the same theme of a pilot that's really trying to figure out his career and kind of his next move, because his current path just isn't really working. And so that kind of that self-discovery and figuring out what's next. And then again, just the practicality of the actual fighting. And I thought that, I mean, I don't think there's an exact movie like this out at all,
Yeah.
which I guess added to kind of its entertainment value. This is a pretty unique film. Not a lot, again, different time period. We don't see tons of World War One, that
Yeah.
immediate period afterwards. So I
Right.
think that's what added to kind of like the entertainment value and the curiosity factor. But that was mine. What would your contemporary comparisons be?
I like that. What I would say is like I was kind of struggling because there is not a to me.
Yeah, it's not a one to one.
But I would say like maybe a different same idea of tra- not travel, but anyway, Ford versus Ferrari.
Okay.
Um, and not again, not a direct parallel, but
Yeah.
like people pushing the envelope with what you
Yeah, I
know
like that. I like that.
a vehicle can do, really pushing the the machine to the limit along
Yeah.
with the human being. And then again with sort of the end of the movie, like that really competitive piece of it. um
Yeah, I
Not a
like
direct
that.
parallel,
That's a good.
but yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Awesome. And then, um, should this movie be remade today? And then who would you star in it?
It's hard to say who I should star in if I say no, so I'll say yes. And I,
No,
and
no,
I
no. You can say no.
no, and I would say yes only in the sense that it is unique.
Yeah.
And so there's not a ton of these being made. So I think with some tweaks or some moderniz, some you could even try to like transfer it into a more modern time, whatever. But
The
with
only way I would not remake this is that they're going to CGI it. I think that would also just be the worst idea ever.
agreed,
It's
but I do think that it's possible that if you did it with real, like out in, not on the set, like not on CGI, not with computer graphics, like I think it could be kind of cool to see what they
yeah,
could
yeah, yeah,
do.
for sure, for sure.
Who would I have star? I was kind of thinking, like going through the Rolodex of all the big stars because he's such a mega star, right? I was
Yeah.
thinking like Gosling. I was thinking like Chris Pine, who I would put in anything.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I can see that.
but actually, I kind of think who would be great. He's a little, I don't want to say washed, but like if he was at the top of his game, I think Russell Crowe could be cool.
Interesting.
Like kind of like the tormented, like that
Yeah.
that that underlying anger that he showed, like when
Yeah,
so
he's probably too big now. I don't know if he could fly, actually be in the plane.
literally too big. That's what I was
Yeah.
saying. Like,
Yeah.
it's tricky just because of his size and age, but like I don't know if that was, yeah. So I would say either Pine or Russell Crowe.
I like that. I would say Pine. I'd probably pick Pine over just because I think Russell Crowe's too old
Yeah,
to do that at this point. Too big, literally too big. Mine was just again kind of with this.
taking shots at Russell, man.
Well, I was gonna say Tom Cruise because I think this was a daring film, and
Yep.
just like there's no other actor that has the balls that, but Tom Cruise would do this. You know what I mean? And Tom Cruise would actually jump on the plane, like Tom Cruise, and he's actually a pilot too.
Yeah.
So it's like I think he's slightly too old for it, but I think that you can still like manipulate the story to
Tom
you,
Cruise is ageless.
yeah, he's ageless. I definitely think he can still pull it off. And again, I think he has the tenacity to actually go through what needs to be done for this movie. So
Yeah, he
uh
has L. Ron Hubbard on his side, so it'd be good.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that is there any other thing you want to add to this film?
Um, no, I think it's. I would just recommend, like you kind of said at the open, and this what, and I texted you. I was like, do we want to do this one for our opening one? Because I hadn't finished it yet, but I'm
Yeah,
glad I did. I'm glad I stuck with it because it is one of those ones where I think a lot of people, the name is kind of strange, right? And the graphic on the, so I think it's one of those ones where people would pass by even though it's Robert Redford, but it's absolutely worth the watch. It's different. It's different than any movie you're going to see
yeah,
or have seen. And you know, I mean, Susan Sarandon, we haven't even mentioned her, a small part, but like great cast,
yeah.
well
The
filmed,
cast, yeah, the
cinematography
cast is
is great.
solid. And
Yeah,
the
I would
German
say
pilots work too. The German pilots kind of reminded me of the Three Migo German pilot guy.
totally. Yeah,
But you know, yeah, I like I said, I don't think this movie's for everybody, but this is on Netflix. And if you're just looking to see a very solid 70s film that's different, I think this kind of fills it. And again, it's not too long, which you know, I think is also its saving grace. So yeah. So with that, let's move into we have one list for us, and we're gonna pick our best Robert Redford films. So, Drew, I'll start with you. Go ahead and reel off your top five.
you want me to do my five or do you want to alternate?
Oh, let's alternate. Let's alternate.
Just because since it's the only the two
No,
of
no,
us.
you're right. You're right. Let's alternate. Good call.
All right. I will put number five, a newer, although like I said to you earlier, I can't believe it's over 20 years old. A newer film, but one that I love from my childhood, and it's got such amazing co-stars like an older Sidney Poitier, um, Ben Kingsley. Uh, I would say is it Ben Kingsley?
I think
Sneakers.
he's in.
Dan Aykroyd. I love Sneakers. Just an awesome modern, like unlikely espionage film with Robert Redford and the gang. I love that movie.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I would have wanted to include this as well. It just goes to show you this how good Robert Redford's career is. I also went with maybe a movie I watched a ton as a kid, and maybe my first memory of Robert Redford. But there's a small movie, not necessarily small, but like a lawyer type movie called Legal Eagles.
Hmm.
It came out in the 80s, and I just remember watching it a ton, and we liked it. And I haven't seen it actually in a long while. I would love to rewatch it, see how it holds up, but
Yeah.
um, I just remember watching that a ton as growing up, and so I had to include it on my top five. But I had to leave off a few other ones. Sneakers would have been great as well. There's another one I'll mention when we get towards the end. But my number four is one I just saw recently, but I was inspired to see it because of Entourage. They mentioned it in Entourage, the movie, and it's just a kind of a classic 70s government type film. And it's 3 days of the Condor. And so that was my number four.
That was my number four too.
Oh,
Great mind.
nice.
Have you seen that recently?
I saw it like a year ago, I think.
It's awesome. The
Yeah.
opening scene in that movie at the espionage headquarters.
Yeah.
So the movie's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys haven't seen that one, check it out. If we had both not seen that one, that would be qualified for this movie club. But yeah,
And it is
unfortunately,
often on the streaming services, so it's
yeah,
definitely worth
I
it.
think it was on Prime when I saw it. So okay, what's your number three?
My number three is hard. I'm gonna have to choose between two monsters. I'm gonna go with The Sting. I also love The Sting as a kid. It was one of my dad's favorite films. Um, Same director as the Great Waldo Pepper. Just a great period piece again.
Yeah, I
Um,
need to check that one out myself. I didn't. I know. I think I've seen it before. I couldn't tell you. I kind
yeah,
of
just Robert Redford hustling. It's a great movie.
awesome. Yeah, for my number three, I went with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Obviously, a iconic role for him, an iconic film. in the late 60s. And yeah, I watched that in film school, so that was classic.
Glad you mentioned it. That's the one I omitted to leave the sting on there. Great movie.
Nice. Oh, and then my number is mine, right? My
Sure.
number 2 is All the President's Men. Again, another film grew up seeing, and that film was so important because like I didn't really know a ton about the Watergate stuff because we didn't study it in our AP class because we ran out of time. So we didn't. The 70s were always kind of a period I study a ton about, and so that film kind of always gave me the background on the whole Deep Throat and all that good stuff. So
AP,
very very good film. Again, if you haven't seen that one of the all-time classics, one of the best 70s films of all time. What do you got?
AP class. I like that humble brag.
Yeah, there you
I am going with All Is Lost.
go. Okay.
Tried to mix in a more modern one,
Yeah.
a one-man show. Um, just a tour de force for a guy in the 70s, both from an acting perspective as well as like the physical requirements of that movie. It was great.
Yeah, that's a solid film. And then what's your number 1?
I mean, you already said it. His number 1 movie, in my opinion, one of the best movies, in my opinion, of all time, All the President's Men. He's amazing. Dustin Hoffman's amazing. Jason Robards is as Ben Bradley, the Washington Post editor. Just the whole film.
Okay, he's excellent in that one.
Incredible.
All right. Well, my number 1, again, just kind of impact in childhood and all that is The Natural. That's kind of how I grew up knowing who Robert Redford was. I don't remember just watching the movie a ton, but I always remember the soundtrack. I remember the scene. And so it's definitely my most impactful film of his. Probably I'm probably with you. Probably not his best role, in terms of acting and all whatnot, but I definitely
if that's your number 1, that's your number 1.
Yeah, and I definitely felt he still had that magnetism of what the role needed, which obviously The Natural is about a great baseball player. So I thought he pulled it off, and just a great film, great childhood memory. So that is our top 5 Robert Redford films, and that will now lead us. So next week, and we want you guys hopefully to watch it ahead of time, but our weekend film for us to be watching will be Marathon Man. That came out in 1976. That's going to be on Paramount Plus, and that's going to be starring Dustin Hoffman. So again, ideally, friends and family, watch the movie ahead of time with us, so you'll be able to follow along. It's a little different format than our other one, but this is again kind of like a book club. We want to inspire you to go watch movies that you haven't seen before. Watch it, and then you can come join us. Again, that's going to be on Paramount Plus, or also MGM Plus if you have that. And then it's directed by John Schlesinger. This is also written by William Goldman, the movie. John Schlesinger also directed Midnight Cowboy, for those looking for something else that he did. So I've never seen this movie, of course, but I've heard good things. It's supposed to be, again, kind of a classic 70s film, and so that'll be on tap for next week. Drew, thanks for joining with us today, and again, make sure everybody like, share, subscribe, again, comment below, watch The Great Waldo Pepper, give us your thoughts. We want to hear what your thoughts, and then also, again, if there's a movie on one of the major streaming services that you want to recommend, please do, and we'll definitely keep it in consideration, and check it out. So we're looking for options. It can be pretty much any movie before 1985, really, just because we're old enough to where I've seen most of everything after 85. But that's roughly, it's not a hard rule, but basically the rule is one of us needs to have not seen it. So that's the simple rule. So with that is a cut, guys. Thanks.